How did Lewis Hamilton be lost with his Ferrari to sign his best classification of the year in Austria? What invisible adjustments were necessary for their talent, that many said in decline, resurfaced just when I needed it most? Today I show you what nobody explained to you about the best qualifying session of Hamilton so far from 2025. And this is where another key factor is revealed: internal comparison. While Hamilton struggled to find a minimal base of trust with the car, Leclerc managed to extract competitive performance, although not dominant, in each race. This not only generated media pressure as expected in the case of Ferrari, but also an internal psychological battle that the British had never faced this level. Unlike his years of rivalry with Nico Rosberg, where the car was the same and both started from common knowledge, here Hamilton started from scratch. And what is worse, started from behind. Frustration accumulated. Internally, Hamilton began to explore Leclerc's pilot style. I imitated its braking points, its way of modulating the accelerator and medium curve, and its way of managing the weight of the car. He even adopted a more progressive entry style in slow curves, trying to reach a higher minimal speed. It was a forced learning process, which at any other stage of his career would have been unnecessary. But now, in Ferrari, it was a matter of survival. And it is in that human, technical, psychological process where the true story is hidden. It was not that Hamilton no longer had the level. It was that he was facing one of the deepest challenges of his professional life, and did it with the pressure of millions of eyes judging every hundredth of a second, with the legend of its name tested in each classification sector. This was not an old pilot trying to resist. He was an absolute champion facing science, the machine, and himself. Everything changed in Austria. It was not a miracle or a blow of luck. It was the consequence of high-risk technical decisions, a surgical work in the Maranello factory, and a new mental disposition of Hamilton that transformed any weekend into an absolute turning point. The Austria Grand Prix not only represented the 11th career of the calendar, but the exact moment in which the Ferrari-Hamilton combination began to make sense. In the Red Bull Ring, the British not only classified his best position of the year until that moment, but did, for the first time, the rhythm of his partner Charles Leclerc. But the most important thing was everything that happened behind that result, which was not seen in the timesheet. Ferrari arrived in Spielberg with an urgent need for answers. After a series of gray actions and a technical evolution that did not deliver clear results, the team chose to introduce a massive update package focused on the soil of the SF25. This decision was not taken lightly. For weeks, engineers evaluated simulations, wind tunnel data, and pilot feedback to redesign 4 critical sections of the flat background. The redesign covered from the frontal fences to the rear diffuser, through the edge of the ground and the so-called floor edge wing, a small aerodynamic protuberance that influences the channeling of the lateral flow. In essence, Ferrari took a new concept of camouflaged car under the same body. What transformed this update into a success was not only its aerodynamic impact, but its direct effect on the behavior of the car. The SF25, which until then had been sensitive and nervous, began to gain stability in medium-speed curves and improved its relationship with the curbs, a critical factor in Austria. For the first time in the season, the rear suspension could properly handle the load generated by the ground, which allowed pilots to carry more aggressive configurations without fear of rebound or sudden loss of adhesion. This improvement was especially significant for Hamilton, which needed predictability to rebuild his trust. But there was another even more revealing aspect: the track operation. Hamilton, in subsequent statements, did not speak so much about the car and the team. He said it had been the best day operatively of the year. This included perfect departure times for fast laps, a very high precision traffic management, and a fluid synergy between pilot and engineers. It was, according to his own words, world-class. What were previously synchronization or late information errors, now became a millimeter choreography that allowed Hamilton to nail his return at the right time, with the ideal tire temperature and without external interference. This level of execution does not occur by accident. It is the product of a team that finally finds its rhythm and a pilot who decides to open completely to the process. In Austria, Hamilton admitted something fundamental. For the first time in the season, he felt he was converging with the Leclerc style. The configuration he used was almost a replica of Monegasco, and finally felt comfortable by applying his style to that setup. This not only leveled the performance between them, but also released Hamilton from the technical uncertainty that had pursued him throughout the year. It was in that classification session where Hamilton, without fireworks, silently placed a founding stone. It was not a pole position or a victory, but it was the first real step towards competitiveness. Austria was the point where he stopped being lost and began to walk clearly. A technical turn, a mental click, and a perfect execution marked the beginning of something bigger than a simple classification, the reconstruction of a champion. This classification in Austria goes far beyond the result itself. Fourth position on the grill may not seem like a milestone for a pilot with 7 world titles, but the context transforms that number into a powerful signal. For Hamilton, this result is not a simple rebound, it is the tangible validation that your effort, your humility to learn, and your ability to adapt are still fully in force. And for Ferrari, it represents the first time in 2025 in which both pilots managed to squeeze the potential of the car synchronized. It is the clear manifestation that their development efforts are finally aligned with track results. Austria's GP confirmed that the barrier between Hamilton and Leclerc, a technical barrier, but also psychological. During the first part of the championship, Hamilton was always chasing a ghost, the understanding of the car that Leclerc had achieved much earlier. This classification showed that there is no persecution, but direct competition. Both cars were in the first 2 rows, separated by hundredths. That closeness in times is not anecdotal. In Formula 1, the distance between teammates is usually the first internal balance thermometer. And now, with Hamilton in rhythm, the dynamics within Ferrari changes completely. At the equipment level, this qualifying session arrived at a crucial moment. With McLaren marking the rhythm of the season and Red Bull ranging between the technical chaos and the institutional pressure, Ferrari desperately needed a sign of strength. The performance in Austria was that signal. It was not a victory or pole, but a solid proof that the foundations of his project are settling. The car responded, the team operated precisely, and for the first time the pilot duo worked as a competitive block. This not only reinforces internal morals, but also sends a direct message to its rivals. Ferrari has aroused. In addition, there is an emotional and symbolic dimension that cannot be ignored. Hamilton has historically been a pilot who responds when the challenge is maximum. From his initial years facing Alonso, to his epic battles with Vettel or Verstappen, his career has been marked by resurgence. But this stage in Ferrari is different. It is not just about overcoming others, but about rebuilding from within. The classification of Austria is the first external reflection of that internal process. It is the sign that the connection with the SF25 is beginning to bloom, that it is no longer about adapting to the car, but of molding it in its style. And this has important consequences for what is coming. If Hamilton manages to consolidate this level of performance, the balance of power within Ferrari could begin to bow. It will no longer be the second pilot who came to contribute experience. It will be a real contender, capable of leading projects, influencing development, and demanding prominence in strategic decisions. His ability to generate positive internal pressure is known, and Austria could be the beginning of a stage in which Ferrari stops depending exclusively on Leclerc to fight. Spielberg classification also revitalizes the fans. Ferrari is a brand full of history, passion, and expectations. Seeing Hamilton at the forefront of that narrative not only awakens nostalgia, but feeds the dream of seeing the Rampante Cavallino return to the top with a pilot who knows exactly what it is to conquer the top. In a championship where the margins are increasingly narrow and where the difference between failure and success is measured in tenths of a second, having Hamilton back in its best version can be the piece that was missing to transform Ferrari as an aspiring real contestant. This result does not define a championship, but it does redefine a season. From Austria, Ferrari ceases to be an unknown technique and Hamilton ceases to be a promise of redemption. Both team and pilot become concrete threats. The classification was just a return. But that return may have changed the course of the whole season. Austria's classification not only left a time sheet, he left a message. A clear message for those who doubted, for those who thought that Hamilton's cycle in the elite was over and that Ferrari was, once again, a giant unable to wake up. This action does not guarantee anything. It does not ensure victories or titles. But it represents the first time in the entire 2025 season in which Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari not only coincided with the performance, but they did it harmoniously, precisely, and above all, competitive. From now on, the question is not whether Hamilton can adapt to the car, but if the team can maintain this ascending line. If Austria was a technical and mental inflection point, the following will be to confirm whether to repeat and transform into a trend. Because the following calendar quotes will not be easier. Circuits arrive with different demands: high-speed curves, extreme traction, abrasive surfaces, changing climates. But what we saw in Spielberg suggests that Ferrari not only has the potential, but begins to find the consistency that had been elusive throughout the first part of the championship. The trust, which had been fragile, now begins to settle. Hamilton, who started the year questioning even if he could interpret the behavior of his car, has made it clear that he is willing to evolve, rewrite his style and rebuild his legacy from the red of Maranello. And that makes it a very serious threat. Because when a pilot of his caliber feels comfortable and, above all, confident, the performance ceases to be a possibility and becomes an inevitable consequence. Therefore, I want to ask you directly, do you think this classification is the beginning of Hamilton's true return at the head of the championship? Do you think that Ferrari has given the necessary technical turn to hold his two pilots in the fight against McLaren and Red Bull? Leave it in the comments.